Well, these shows get a little tougher every week after a loss, and this week is no exception. The Cincinnati Bengals lose to the Baltimore Ravens on Sunday Night Football yet again on the last play of the game, last second field goal, and they fall to 2-3. That's not the way I wish to have started off the show, but that's the reality of things. I'm Anthony Cosenza. He's John Sheeran. This is the Orange and Black Insider Bengals podcast, part of the Cincy Jungle Podcast Network. John, you've been burning the candle at both ends, as they say, but you pulled yourself up by the bootstraps and been killing it on the website and on podcasts, including this one. How you doing, man?
I'm doing good. I don't know if it's like an ominous sign, but like as soon as the show started, I hear like a really loud cold wind outside of my apartment. I don't know if it's because we're about to talk about another loss, but I'll keep an eye on that.
I was wondering what was happening because as the intro was going, I could see you backstage there, and you kind of had this peripheral.
It's spooky season, though.
Yeah, there you go. Very festive over there. Well, we're going to talk about all the things with the Bengals losing to the Ravens there, an ugly 19-17 loss by the team, and their second divisional loss in 5 games. Not good. There were some alterations to the offensive, I guess, play calling and or repertoire of play. So we'll get into that. We've got some questions to ask. We've got a lot of different things. We've got some fun Bengals trivia. We'll get to that in a little bit as well. But again, you can get this show in a variety of ways on our YouTube channel. There is an icon below John there for those watching the video, whether it's live or after the fact. There's an icon by the SB Nation Cincy Jungle icon down in the bottom right corner. You can click that to subscribe. Click the bell to be notified when we go live, when new content is available. And of course, if you are an audiophile and you like to listen to us jammer on your car stereo or at home, whatever, you can subscribe to the Cincy Jungle Podcast Network. Bengal Jim and friends had a great show last night. They had TJ Hushmanzada on the show, so you want to check out that one. We're doing our thing here, multiple shows a week, and of course, Matt Minnick breaking down things for you on Coach Speak and Chalk Talk, all part of the podcast network. Get it where you can. Well, John, I mean, as we kind of tease, let's kind of start talking about this thing. I guess let's start with the bad first and also the inexplicable. The Bengals lose to the Baltimore Ravens, their second in-division loss in 5 games so far this year. Not good. Two games that they really should have had when you look at everything. Bengals are the first team in NFL history, and this is thanks to Ben Baby and ESPN stats there. Bengals are the first team in history to lose 3 games on the final play within their first 5 games.
Yeah, thanks for
yeah, and then there was another one. I think I got to go look back at this one here, but it has something to do with the defense not giving up a touchdown here. Let's see. Defense is not allowed a second half touchdown all season long, but have given up somehow 3 game-winning drives. The Bengals could not pass the football against the team, the Ravens defense, that has allowed the most passing yards up to that point. Make it make sense to me, John.
I can't. I mean, what? So, going into this game, man, like my main concern for them, this is a rivalry, and the Bengals defense has disciplined a mastery of how to limit Lamar Jackson from doing Lamar Jackson things on a regular basis. Now, Lamar Jackson is Lamar Jackson, and he's going to do Lamar Jackson things. I've said Lamar Jackson 5 times in 10 seconds, but that's how they won the game.
Yeah, you didn't stumble over it, so good for you, man.
I mean, neither did he on the final drive when they got him into field goal, into system kicker Justin Tucker field goal range. So the Bengals defense is at a point where they're familiar with the Ravens, and they've developed a scheme, they've accumulated personnel to limit them as much as humanly possible. With the Bengals offense, they've had years now going up against Wink Martindale. They're aggressive, man-heavy, blitz-heavy defense, and that's part of the reason why the Bengals were able to eviscerate them last year. They took advantage of a ton of one-on-one opportunities, a lot of cover 1, cover 0, cover 3, what the Ravens typically normally played in that man-heavy scheme. And then the Ravens have shifted to a different style of defense under a new defensive coordinator, and that was my concern. What are they going to do against the Ravens defense that they have no experience going up against? The personnel hasn't really changed. Like Marlon Humphrey, Marcus Peters as badly as Marlon Humphrey got beat last year, like, he's still a good quarterback, and he showed why he's still a good quarterback in this game. Marcus Peters still has ball hockey mentality. The loss of, I think, Marcus Williams during the game, it may have impacted some things, but at the end of the day, like, we talked about that defense still being talented from a personnel standpoint, and in this game, I said it, man. Like, I would have thought that it could have been a get-right game for that defense to institute more too-high looks. I think 70% of their defense was in too-high, either quarter, half, or just simple cover two, and it worked. And it continued to work because the Bengals continued to not show competency in attacking those coverages. A lot of times you saw route concepts that didn't offer spacing, and even when you had a numbers advantage on a certain side of the field, it allowed the Ravens to sit back in their zones and to basically cover multiple routes at once. And that's why I think you had, for the most part, Joe Burrow continuing to look down to his checkdowns on a frequent basis. And it's not necessarily a bad thing. It kept drives sustained. It kept the chains moving at certain times, but it basically eliminated any possibility for explosive plays. The only potential explosive play that they had, aside from a deep Mike Thomas comeback, was a deep route to Mike Thomas in the end zone, where unfortunately Burrow didn't put enough mustard on the ball, and it ended up going out of bounds too much, and Thomas couldn't get his feet in bounds. So the Ravens did exactly what we expected them to do, and the Bengals didn't have any previous tape on this defense doing those types of things in coverages, and unfortunately they didn't look particularly prepared.
Well, first of all, it wouldn't be a live show without our boy Andrew Seiler saying, "Oh yes, I always love when Andrew comes in here and gives us one of those. Good to see you, Andrew, and all of you saying hooday and hello on the Cincy Jungle Facebook page, on our live YouTube chats, and of course, if you're joining us on Twitter as well." John, so there's a lot of talking points this week, and the favorite ones are Zach Taylor, the play caller, and what are the Bengals doing for scheme and all kinds of things. We're going to talk about a lot of that. Don't fret, ladies and gentlemen. But there are a couple of items that a lot of people don't seem to be talking about, and maybe it's because they're not as smart as I think. They're not as interesting of a topic as I think they are. But one of the elements you mentioned was the familiarity aspect. And you said the Bengals defense is familiar with the Ravens offense and Lamar Jackson playing contained, doing all those kinds of things now that have kind of limited the damage and points here. And oh, by the way, to go with that myriad of stats I started this segment off with, Bengals defense is letting up 16.4 points a game right now. I mean, that is incredibly manageable when you have these type of players on offense. But John, familiarity, the one thing that you brought that up, not many people are talking about the fact that the Ravens and the Steelers had made some specific offseason moves to bolster their pass defense. They had some extra chips on their shoulders based on what the Bengals did to them twice each last year. And those teams are a bit more familiar with the Bengals schemes, the Bengals players, the Bengals concepts than, say, a Jets. Yeah, I know the Jets played them last year, but they didn't play them twice. Or a team like the Dolphins, that sort of thing. I'm beginning to wonder now if this offseason narrative of, hey, the rest of the NFL may be catching up a little bit to what the Bengals are trying to do. I'm wondering if this is particularly the case within the division, given what the Ravens and Steelers did to the Bengals this year so far.
Well, I mean, they've definitely caught up at this point. Like, that's indisputable. Until the Bengals find counters to the counters that their rivals have made because of what they did to them last year, like the narrative isn't going to really change. Like, the Steelers and Ravens were able to do whatever they want against the old Bengals offense because they couldn't protect. They had a quarterback who was skittish in the pocket. It was just hopeless towards the end of the Marvin Lewis days. Then you institute a new offense with a quarterback who isn't afraid to push the ball down the field. You have weapons that can stretch the field. The Ravens and Steelers don't adapt in time, and that gave the Bengals the jump on those specific teams. The Browns, I guess, are another story, but we'll talk about that when they actually play the Browns in a couple weeks. And now you have, like you said, the Ravens and Steelers making specific adjustments, not just for their overall defenses, but for these matchups, right? And it wasn't just the personnel additions. It was schematic evolutions to their overall defense. Like, you're talking about teams that typically don't play too high coverages, that typically like to stay in man, and that wasn't the case this year because why would it be? Like, why would any other defense deviate from this extremely known winning strategy in facing the Bengals offense. And I think it definitely helped that, the Ravens didn't have to face T. Higgins for the majority of this game. It came down to, we've had this conversation a myriad of times in the past several years now, and this one of the main talking points as to why, Jamar Chase was so valuable in adding to this offense is that when you only have one guy that's capable of stretching the field, it allows defenses to really park the bus back there, and they're not really afraid of anyone taking the top off of them. They could just cloud coverage their only vertical threat out there. Like, no one's really afraid of Mike Thomas taking the top off your defense. Tyler Boyd stays in the slot because he doesn't have that burst. He doesn't have that second gear in him. So, the T. Higgins injury, I think, definitely had an impact. But Anthony, it's also comes to the point where if you have a quarterback that you believe to be amongst the elite, and you have a head coach that's entering his fourth year as a play caller, it's like the injury to one receiver, albeit a really good one, it shouldn't really hinder this offense as much as it is.
It should not, but I mean, it really, it really is, and I think you are seeing the value in which T. Higgins is bringing to this team. I mean, I know we all know Jamar Chase is a superstar, and what he did last year was fantastic. But I mean, it can't be overstated what this offense is when all hands are on deck, and T. Higgins specifically is on deck. I want to share this. I thought this was an interesting tidbit, and you can go find the entire article on the Cincinnati Enquirer. This is from Charlie Goldsmith here, and you can see a little bit. Tyler Boyd's targets are down because when Jamar Chase lines up in the slot, Boyd hasn't had a featured role. The quote from Brian Callahan was, when you're moving Jamar into the slot, those are generally Boyd's targets. That's the trade-off. So a lot of people are saying, where's Tyler Boyd? Why is he not getting the ball? And rightfully so. Even Boyd himself, I think, was maybe a little bit frustrated. That's coming off of that. But like you kind of intimated there, I mean, even if there is this trade-off, you got to find some designs to get these players on the field and get, if the one read isn't there, you got to find a way to get another guy the ball, because these guys are too talented to not make plays, and they're too talented to only put up 17 points, a little over 200 yards passing by Joe Burrow against a Ravens defense that led up the most passing yards up to that point last week. You need to be better, and the play calling is suspect in a lot of different ways. I mean, I know that's kind of by committee, as Zach Taylor told us this week, but I mean, there are major concerns and questions in that regard.
I had an interesting discussion with Bengals fans before the show via Twitter, and he was talking about, like general thoughts on what the offense can do better, and beyond just the play calling issue. I think everyone is in agreement that the play calling committee of Taylor, Callahan, Pitcher, Walters, everyone in charge in distributing the play calls, like, they should do things that, keep Burrow in mind, like play to his strengths. And I think that kind of leads into some of the issues that we're seeing, because I think Sands brought up a good point, and this was with the discussion that he had with Jake Lisco, and it's that when Burrow is reading downfield, like route concepts that kind of work off each other, that kind of stress zone coverages on one side of the field and creates openings, it's almost like on some of those route concepts, we don't see them enough to create spacing down the field, which is how you kind of spread out, the coverages that have 7-8 guys back there. And when you have a lot of targets going to Jamar Chase, who's isolated on one side of the field, and he's not getting over the top because you have safeties who are just bracketing over the top of him, or you have cloud coverage over top of him. It's almost like Burrow is more comfortable just trusting Chase to get open on those one-on-ones compared to reading off other concepts where you have, multiple routes on one side of the field that are designed to either make a cornerback in the flat kind of drop back towards deep and create vacancies up front, or vice versa, right? You have like a smash concept where you have a little hitch route and you're trying to, bait the safety down towards, the front of the line of scrimmage so you could open up the back of the field. It's almost like those are the routes that I think would unlock more of what the offense wants to do, and we're not really seeing them. And I don't know if it's because Burrow is more comfortable with the other more isolated routes, but I think there needs to be some type of a healthy marriage between the two to get Burrow more comfortable in stressing those parts of the field, because until they do, we're not going to see much change, right? It's either going to be miscommunication errors from the secondary where those explosive plays then get opened up and then you can target Jamar Chase down the field, or you're just going to have check down after check down after check down, because the concepts that they're working with right now, like, they're not creating enough space down the field, and that's the most important part.
Yeah, and I think that's where a lot of the frustration was at least at the beginning of the game. It was kind of Joe Flacco ball for a little bit. It was captain checkdown for quite a while at the beginning of the game, and it's just, we're not really accustomed to that with this group and what we saw last year. One thing that was working, and one thing that they were trying to do, they were mixing in some RPO stuff, and they were finally getting some things going on the ground, particularly with Joe Mixon. John, going into this game, Joe Mixon had 2.7 yards per carry on the season based on his performance, and I think he had about 5.5 yards per carry, as did P. Ryan, if memory serves, in this game. He boosted his overall. I mean, it's still not good, but he boosted his overall yards per carry average to 3.1. But the Bengals were able, while they were not able to do some things in the passing game and make the explosive plays or the big plays in the passing game, they were able to finally generate some chunk yardage off RPOs and different plays there. What's your take on the run game? And is this something that can be sustained, or, maybe that was just something the Ravens were willing to concede this week to not let the others beat them?
So this was a topic of my article that I wrote today on Cincy Jungle. There, in this game, it was astonishing to see the splits between how many gap scheme run plays the Bengals ran compared to zone. It was 15-3 in favor of gap scheme, which I don't think has been done under Frank Pollock in the 4 or 5 years that he's been here. Because Frank Pollock majored in zone blocking, like the Callahan coaching tree, Brian Callahan. That's zone, right? But this is what I think a lot of us have been wondering, like, when is this transition going to come? Because it seems like the composition of this offensive line is more well suited for gap man style running concepts. And that's what we saw against the Baltimore Ravens. And for weeks now, they've been preaching, if you can run the ball against light boxes, you will force a safety to come up into the box, and that creates spacing down the field. And I think, I'm not harping on Burrow here. I'm saying that he doesn't have that Josh Allen arm where he can just launch it over both safeties, right? Like, and you just can't have that with the arm that he has, right? So you need to create spacing down the field with your running game and with your short passing attack. And this game, I think, was what they envisioned at the beginning of the season to eventually get to that point, because the Ravens consistently had 6-man boxes, and the Bengals can always have an extra blocker in with Hayden Hurst, or an extra added blocker with Hakeem Adeniji.
Yeah.
But against 6-man boxes, they were just pounding the ball and just against space that the Ravens were creating for them, right? Like, to me, that's taking what the defense gives you. Don't make it harder than what it has to be. Like with zone, like, I think it's better to run those wide zone concepts against stack boxes, because when you're stretching out the defense laterally, you're trying to create space with zone blocking. But when you have the space that the defense gives you with light boxes, you can just pound the ball right ahead and just take the open gaps that the defense gives you. And that's exactly what the Bengals did. And that's why the run game was a lot more efficient. And I think Mixon looked at least healthier and more confident in attacking downhill. And even on those cutbacks that he had, like, there was no force player for the Ravens to, force him back inside. Like, he was cutting back to open space, and he was getting a lot of extra yards. So this was the running game that the Bengals envisioned against light boxes, and for whatever reason, it took them 5 weeks to actually get to this point. But this is why I think you can have some myriad of faith in progress going forward, because if they continue to do this, the defenses will eventually have to respect it.
They will move up. Yeah, they will move up. They will add more to the box, and that's where there's going to be potentially the opportunity for bigger plays down the field that they have been completely lacking this year. It's been, I mean, there's been some nice plays on this offense, but it really has been, I don't know if vanilla is the right word. I don't know if pedestrians are the right word, but it has not been anywhere near as exciting as it was last year. And I think, like you said, the correlation of some of the route concepts, but also this finally figuring out a semblance of a run game this week. And hopefully that's a key that they maybe utilize going forward to unlock some things. That, John, before we get to our next segment here, just quickly, Bengals, I've said it now, this will be the third time, dropped 2 division games within their first 5 weeks. Now they've got basically most of the NFC South right in a row here, sandwiched in with a road game to Cleveland before in their next 4 games before the bye. I would assume you would agree with me in that the Bengals need to go at least 3-1 in that stretch, with one of those 3 wins being against Cleveland at this point, based on how these first 5 weeks have gone.
Yeah, it has to happen at this point, and you can even look beyond that. I think they have the Steelers pretty soon after that, and like the Titans. Like they're going to be games when the Bengals are either favored or they're barely underdogs because of like a road advantage. Mm-hmm. Like none of those teams are particularly impressive, and I think for the most part, none of them pose, imposing defenses. I would say definitely not Cleveland. Like Saints are pretty middle of the road defensively. Same thing with the Panthers, who now have a new coaching staff, and who knows what's going on with all that. The Falcons defense is nothing to really pound their chest about. So statistically on paper, like there are opportunities for this offense to get right, but like we talked about last week, like the Ravens weren't exactly having a lot of success in stopping the pass, but they instituted a scheme that the Bengals have yet to show progress against, and that will be the blueprint. But at the very least, like these are teams that, for the most part, don't have really imposing pass rushes, and hopefully T. Higgins can get healthy, and that can put those defenses in a bind. But this is undoubtedly a stretch where the Bengals have to get right on offense.
Here's Mr. Whisper, Mr. Generosity, Mr. Whisper. Thank you, and that will continue to help out the Pollock Family Foundation there. Thank you for your super chat, your YouTube chat, and of course those take precedence in terms of getting on the air and or being answered when we do the listener questions live episodes and whatnot. But he writes, John, hey guys, have your season predictions changed after the first 5 weeks? Obviously at this point, so it's really funny because before the season I said, I think maybe the Bengals sweep the Steelers. I think they split with the Ravens. I think they potentially split with the Browns again, and I think I was labeled a hater for having them going 4-2 in the division, and that I didn't respect them, and I'm a joke, all kinds of different comments that were left in various spots. But right now I think I had them at either 4-1 or 3-2 at this point. I'd have to go back and look. So I don't think it's drastically changed, and the good news too is that the 2 wins they do have are conference wins. So when it comes to potential tiebreakers, obviously division and all that stuff takes precedence, but conference record does matter up there as well. So you like that. I wouldn't say it has altered too much, but I keep saying it's like every week, hey, you got to show me more. Hey, this week means a lot and all that. And as we're still kind of in this early-ish part of the season, but it's now getting to the point where it's like, hey, like you said, it's starting to be like we can't wait around for things to start developing and progressing. Like it needs to start happening pretty immediately.
I don't remember ever putting this on record. I don't know if I did this on the show or not, but I think when looking at the first 5 weeks, I had him at 3-2 with losses at Dallas, which I presume was going to be Dak at quarterback, and I had them losing this game, or at least that was my thought coming into this season.
I did too.
Yeah. I didn't think they were going to beat all 3 AFC North teams on the road on Sunday Night Football, and I thought the Ravens are going to be good, and turns out they're pretty good. So I had them at 3-2. They're 2-3. They could easily be 3-2. Obviously, their issues on offense are concerning. I think in general, their struggles, like it's not about if they're surprising, it's about how different they are compared to last year, because last year they were dealing with offensive line issues, and the main thing wasn't just about just general play calling. It's how do you call plays aggressively throughout a game when you don't trust your offensive line. It doesn't seem like there's that lack of trust with the offensive line now. It's progressed to a point where they're a functioning, competent unit. Now it's just about how are you going to beat these types of coverages that teams are just going to roll out every single week. And that's concerning because you don't know how they're going to progress off of that. You would hope to think that they would find answers and that they would become more balanced with their running game being a little better. But as far as like their overall season outlook, no, I don't think it's changed that much. Like I think I had them around 10 wins, maybe 9 or 10 at that point, and they're only one off of where I would have had them had all things been equal before the season. So no, I think they're about staying the course, and it's just about just getting things right, and that remains to be seen.
I think I had them at 11 wins, but again, 1 or 2 the other way also wouldn't have surprised me either. But again, it's just a frustrating start to the season because you have you're 3 losses by a combined 8 points. You're losing games, by 2.7 points. It's unbelievable on average. So frustrating start to be sure. But thank you, Mr. Whisper, for your generous YouTube chat there, super chat. Well, this is kind of a blend of a couple of different segments, a state your case or a believe it or not, because there's multiple questions and multiple takes to be had here. I guess we'll go with the state your case. I don't know, the state your case graphic here. Let's do it because we've got some questions to ask about one area that isn't being talked about as much again this week. So we've heard about play calling. We've heard about Zach Taylor and people calling for him. I mean, I guess there's people out there calling for him to be fired. I don't think that's very rational. I think maybe
6 years left on his deal.
Yeah, I think it's the play calling duties. I think it's, Zach Taylor, the play caller, Zach Taylor, the ad hoc offensive coordinator, so to speak. That's what's coming under fire. But, it's the plays, it's the design, it's the run scheme. It's a lot of different things, a lot of different villains or, indictments being thrown out there. One thing that's not being talked about, though, is a little bit of personnel and personnel decisions and where certain players are in the mix with some of these things. And you brought up a really good point about T. Higgins missing from the lineup. And we briefly kind of talked about what he means to the Bengals offense. And obviously, based on when he leaves, there are some massive dry spells and there is a far less amount of comfort for Joe Burrow, particularly when it comes to throwing balls in the middle of the field, the intermediate routes, that sort of thing, because T. Higgins is so good at contested catches and he's got that big body, big wingspan, the whole deal. But when he's out of the game, I mean, Mike Thomas had a nice play last week, and a couple of weeks earlier, I think he had a drop in the end zone as well at some point. But I mean, there's hit and miss there. Like you said, he's not the dominant threat or as threatening of a receiver as T. Higgins. But not only when T. Higgins is out, but when your offense is losing a spark or losing, they're not getting these big plays. They're not creating these big plays. There seems to be a specific member of the offensive personnel that you could potentially utilize in some fashion, and the Bengals just are not doing that. And that, again, is Chris Evans. And I asked the question, where is he? Why is he not on the field? Why is he not getting offensive snaps? It's not like he's getting a lot of opportunities in the kickoff return game. So, you're talking about maybe saving his health in that regard. He's not getting those touches. This is a guy that you could use as a wide receiver 4 or step in as wide receiver 3 sometimes if T. Higgins has that ankle injury lingering out there. Not the same player, but a guy that could provide a nice safety net for Burrow, short, intermediate routes, that sort of thing. And now with the aforementioned altered run scheme that's starting to maybe gain a little more ground than it did the previous month, maybe he's a fit there for some more explosive plays too. John, I don't have an answer for it, but I'm just asking the question, why haven't we seen more Chris Evans, especially with the offensive struggles, lack of big plays and lack of points?
Closest thing I can think is that he's just not practicing well. And if he's not practicing well, he's not getting those plays called in his name. He's not getting opportunities in practice to be a part of the playbook. I think in general, like when people and fans ask for like wholesale changes with personnel and scheme and play calling, it's really just throwing out the book in the middle of the season and starting anew. And then you're removing a lot of the work that you did in the offseason. Now, granted, if it's just not producing results and maybe there's no point in keeping it in general, or there's the idea of kind of sticking to what the process is and hoping that more work and more continuity makes it work. With Evans specifically, I mean, he's been on the field for like 5 snaps, and I actually remember like 1 or 2 targets that he had, one being deep against the Miami Dolphins. I think Burrow kind of overthrew him a little bit. So in terms of, percentage of deep targets compared to snaps, I guess he's leading the team. But yeah, man, if he's not involved in the offense in any way, shape, or form on game days, like it's hard to imagine he's involved at all in practice. And that could be for reasons that are beyond our knowledge. Like, we don't know what goes on in practice. We don't know how he does in practice. This has gone back to the days of Marvin Lewis, when you have talented guys who aren't getting snaps, and the whole narrative around it is that they're just not showing up from Monday through Saturday, and that might just be the case here.
Well, it is the case. And like, I mean, you talk about wholesale changes or throwing out the playbook. That's not even really what I'm saying. It's more just integrate them here and there, especially when your offense is missing a spark of some kind. And if there is, maybe his route tree is far more limited than I'm giving him credit for. I kind of, not only because of his number, but I kind of also see some elements of Gio Bernard's game. We've seen it in the preseason, and that's what he was touted for. He's flashed it in, the Lions game last year and whatnot. But it just baffles me when, they're just not, the offense is not clicking. They're not making plays in the run game. They're not doing, and they just are not going to that well to at least see. And like you said, it could be something that we don't see on a daily basis, whether it's practice, attitude. I don't know. I know that they value P. Ryan in the pass blocking department, and that's why he's in there on some of the concepts, as well as spelling Mixon. Mixon had some nice runs last week, so they wanted to definitely kind of keep that momentum going there. But it just baffles me how this guy is not, and maybe I overvalue him. Maybe we have overvalued him. The collective we have overvalued what he can do on offense. But this was the guy I know the coaching staff was excited about when they drafted him. He flashed last year, and he's just been an absolute ghost for whatever reason this year. And I feel like he's not going to be a cure-all for the Bengals offense, but if he can provide the occasional spark, or if you think he can provide the occasional spark, why is he not getting the snaps?
It's not a very good place to be at when you're resorting to like your third string back as like an answer for the spark. You know,
it's
what I mean?
not. It's not. But the versatility. I'm speaking more to the versatility and the fact that this staff has talked about him as a guy that they can use as a weapon. And obviously he is now, with Brandon Wilson out of the lineup, he's been the kickoff return guy. So they value his athleticism and potential for big plays, at least on a special teams basis. So you would think that there's maybe the occasional opportunity there for him to do that. We saw it against the Lions last year.
Yeah, and I think in games like this past Sunday, Mike Thomas got, I think, at least 90% of the snaps in T. Higgins' place. Like maybe Stanley Morgan got a handful. Like they don't have great depth of receiver, and this was an issue going into the season. This is why a lot of people banged the table for them to keep Kendrick Pryor. Who knows what role he would have had he'd stayed around and T. Higgins suffered this ankle injury. I think there is a point to be made when you do have an injury like that. It eliminates the question, if you're putting Chris Evans on the field, who are you taking off the field? Well, you don't have one of your best players on the field in the first place, so it doesn't hurt to rotate that guy in on an occasional basis to provide a potential spark. Now, are you featuring him on most of those plays when he's on the field? Maybe, maybe not. Like, again, like I look back to that slot fade route that Burrow tried to get him when they were in empty on like a third down. They targeted Chris Evans. So when he's been on the field, I guess there is a semblance of trust, and maybe I am not giving him as much credit. I'm trying to read the tea leaves here as to why he's not being involved, and it could just be for reasons that we don't know, or maybe he really just isn't that good. But he's made some plays whenever he's been given the chance. Now, most of that has been in the preseason. But at this point, when you do lack a semblance of explosion because one of your more explosive players is playing on a bad ankle, it couldn't hurt.
I mean, I'm going to pin any comment that says 3 key words, AC is right. I'm going to pin that all night long. Thank you again for another generous super chat, Mr. Whisper. But I'm sure that Mike Thomas is much more familiar with the route concepts and everything that T. Higgins is asked to do on offense. And I'm not saying Chris Evans can step into T. Higgins' role and run the same routes and all that. I'm not saying that by any stretch of the imagination. But when you lose a very potent offensive weapon in Higgins due to injury, again, you got to kind of make things happen. Mike Thomas occasionally has made the occasional play over the past handful of years with the Bengals. I can remember him having a touchdown catch in I think it was 2020 against Cleveland, and a big comeback in that one. And he stepped in admirably at times. But again, this is a guy that has been touted as a weapon and a guy that has versatility that is valued, and I'm just very surprised at it. And so the question is, is he a fit for what they do? Like you said, you're just kind of reading the tea leaves, and I don't know that we're going to be able to answer the questions that we're asking about Chris Evans, but I'm just at a loss as to why he's not getting at least more offensive snaps, and even potentially, John, not even putting the ball in his hands, even as a decoy that could be used to some degree as well. I'm just kind of lost about it.
And I think it doesn't help his case that in the times when P. Ryan has been used as a receiver, like in this past game, he had 4 catches, like an average depth of target on his targets was negative 2.3, and he managed 48 yards after contact. Like P. Ryan has shown that when he's got the ball in his hands in space, like he's not the most elusive guy, but he can break off tackles, right? He can run through contact, and he can get some extra added yards. And with Evans, it's more of the elusive type, right? It's making people miss. And in his running style in general, I feel like that has kind of turned coaches off a little bit because he's not always following his gaps. He's just trying to play hero ball as a running back, and maybe that leads to him being more of an out wide option in the passing game. And I think you're right though. Like out of all their reserve options, he's definitely the most athletic, and I think that has value when you're trying to stretch a defense. And it's just a matter of if he's being asked to do a lot of those things in practice, and maybe he's not.
Maybe he's not. But that is this week's State Your Case. We're talking Chris Evans, where art thou? And maybe the Bengals will try and get him some snaps going forward. Maybe there's something going on that we don't know about. Either some injury, like you said, maybe some ineffectiveness shown in practice, or not grasping some of the concepts they want him to run out there. But there's something puzzling going on there, because that was a guy I think a lot of us were excited about in terms of his potential role this year. And just it has not been there. Like you said, what, five offensive snaps all year?
5 or 6, yeah.
Oh my goodness. Just, yeah, should be above that. He should be getting that per game is what I think in some degrees, but obviously situations will dictate that. Let's transition to the game ahead. A lot of the Bengals with LSU ties go back to Louisiana, and the Cincinnati Bengals take on the New Orleans Saints. And we'll start with this. We'll start with the injury report, because Bengals may or may not be facing their old friend Andy Dalton for the 3rd time in 3 years. We don't know yet. Jameis Winston did have a limited session at practice. T. Higgins, unfortunately, did not practice, so not looking good there. Again, maybe Chris Evans, maybe, I don't know. So here you go here. Let's pull this up, the Saints and Bengals injury report. By the way, look at how much more extensive the Saints is than the Bengals, so I guess that's pretty good news here. You got La'el Collins still had a rest day here, but man, you got to wonder about that back situation. Ankle injury for T. Higgins, did not practice. Jonah, who apparently dislocated his knee against the Ravens, and then of course I think he had an MCL sprain on top of that. He's just had some bad injuries, man, in his time, but played through it against Baltimore. And you had Devin Asiasi, who's had some form of an ankle issue ever since he joined the team. He went limited, as did Hurst with a groin, and P. Ryan with an ab issue, limited as well. So only a handful, half dozen Bengals players on the midweek injury report. The Saints doubled or tripled them up here. I mean, this is unbelievable. But you have Michael Thomas, and there are reports that he could come back as well. And then, of course, you had Jameis Winston, who has all kinds of issues, a back issue, an ankle issue. He went limited this week, so we're not quite sure exactly who we will see, but it could be Dalton. It could be Jameis. Anything else to report on this as we continue to talk on this, John?
Did the Saints have a healthy receiver on their roster? Because I see 4 who didn't practice.
Yeah, I think Olave had the concussion. Yeah, and then Michael Thomas. But reports are Michael Thomas may make a return this week. Landry didn't practice with the ankle, and then of course, Deontay Hardy had a foot issue as well, didn't practice. So yeah, that's a good point. And then of course some other big names on there: Throckmorton, Ramczyk, Taysom Hill went limited. So a couple of different names on there.
Yeah, Taysom Hill's going to play. I don't think a lot of things can stop that guy. It's crazy.
No.
Like even without Sean Payton, like he's playing his best football, and it seemed like Sean Payton was his only believer in the universe. So Taysom Hill, man,
still doing it. Still doing it. Yeah, Taysom Hill. So let's talk about the Bengals defense in this one. Again, they're allowing 16.4 points a game so far right now, but it could be either the Saints potentially explode offensively with all of those weapons and depending on who plays quarterback, or it could be that it's more of the same. What would you tend to believe as you look at the roster here for the Saints and what you've seen from them, a 2-3 team as well?
Yeah, I mean, I haven't seen a ton of the Saints. Like I saw that London game when I think that was Dalton's first start, and he had a pretty traditional Andy Dalton stat line of like 280 with a touchdown and a pick. And I think he's played relatively well in the Saints scheme. Like he's got good receivers. He's got still a good offensive line. He hasn't made a ton of like wow throws, but he hasn't necessarily been like a hindrance to their offense. I think he's got like a PFF grade of 80 or so. Hill is an interesting variable because he popped off last week. He had 3 touchdowns, albeit against one of the worst defenses in the league in the Seattle Seahawks. He only rushed the ball 9 times. He's carried the ball 21 times so far this year. I don't know if playing against a terrible Seahawks defense gives them more confidence to give him more touches, but Alvin Kamara is back as well, and I would imagine they wanted to feature him. But just in his 4 games this year, Taysom Hill's carried the ball 4 times, 3 times, 5 times, 9 times. Now, he's averaged 10 yards a carry because he averaged 20 yards a carry in week 1 and 12 yards a carry in this past week. But it's not like he's consistently, shredding defenses. He's a variable for sure, and they use him in a myriad of ways. I guess he's a tight end in fantasy options, which pisses some people off. But yeah, like it's like, yeah, when he's out on the field, you have to account for him. And I think you just have to make sure that he doesn't get to the outside because he is very fast. So I don't know. Like I still don't know a ton about how they use him, to be honest with you. But I just know that when he's on the field, I'm sure the Bengals are going to be ready for him.
What do you think is a better matchup for the Bengals, Jameis or Andy Dalton, in terms of who they would rather face? Because, look, Jameis can wing it, but he turns the ball over. Dalton's 2-0 against him. I know he left the Bears game early last year, but, I mean, technically as a starter, he is 2-0 against the Bengals since leaving them. A little bit more careful with the football is Dalton, but prone to the occasional mistake. I don't know.
That is a good question. I feel like, unfortunately, with the Bengals defense, they're not tremendously opportunistic in terms of their pass defense. Like they are one of the most aggressive defenses in trying to poke the ball out. Like you will see that 5-10 times a game, always trying to punch the ball out, right? But in terms of like stepping into passing lanes and taking advantage when the ball's in the air, that's not really what the Bengals defense has been known for. And I feel like with Winston, like in his 3 games, he has 7 turnover-worthy throws. Like that's always been Jameis Winston's MO. He can't necessarily sustain an offense. He lives off those explosive plays. So maybe he gives the Bengals defense more chances to make plays. And I mean, what am I saying? Von Bell's an interception machine right now. He's on pace for like 16 interceptions or whatever. But aside from him, like it's not really what the Bengals defense has been known for. So like I'm almost inclined to believe that like Andy Dalton would give them a better chance. But on the other side, this is potentially Winston's first game back. He might not be 100% healthy, but he wants to reestablish himself as a starter, and he might start pressing and might give the Bengals more chances. So I feel like it's more of a toss-up, and honestly, looking back at those injuries that they have at receivers, even if some of them do play, they might not be at 100%. Maybe they won't be able to generate a lot of separation. It could just be, either quarterback in my mind would probably force balls into tight windows when they shouldn't.
Well, I mean, and I think when you have Dalton suiting up for any team, 3 in the last 3 years, you would, he's got a little chip on his shoulder about playing his old team there. So I understand that. Interesting point you bring up about the Bengals defense too. There's not a lot of gamblers on the on the corners or linebackers or safeties. It's a lot of make the heady play, make the smart play. If the interception's there, definitely go for it. But it's a lot of play sound technique, play good football, and get off the football field type of stuff, it seems, especially from the secondary there. But secondary has played well. Von Bell, as you mentioned, has been playing very well. And this not only is a reunion for the LSU guys on this team, there are a lot of ex-Saints on this team here. Hendrickson, Bell, I'm probably missing a couple others off the top of my head here, but two of the biggies right there. And, so there's potentially a lot of emotion, a lot of different outside the lines elements, I guess, when you factor in the LSU connection, former Saints playing on the Bengals, Andy Dalton, all of that. There's kind of a lot of extra outside the line storylines going on here.
I would imagine if Mike Thomas does play, Eli Apple would be craving.
Yeah,
that
Apple.
Matchup.
There you go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Trey Hendrickson going up against Ryan Ramczyk's the right tackle. They drafted Trevor Penning. I don't know if he's healthy or not. This is bad research by me. Who the heck is the Saints left tackle here? Let's look it up real quick. It's James Hurst. Yeah,
that's right.
Former Raven. So he's okay, but that should be in favor of the Bengals there. So yeah, I think there's going to be some emotions in this game. I think in general, like the Bengals don't want to fall to 2-4 either. So I look back at it was 2014, I believe. They were coming off of a terrible, like one of the worst losses in franchise history, Thursday Night Football against the Browns, and they had like a extended break, and then they went on like a 3-game road trip. First one was against the Saints, and I think that was the last time they played in the Superdome. You had Jermaine Gresham with that whole incident in the stands or whatnot. I don't know. I kind of see that game kind of like this one, where the Saints, I don't think that they're a bad team necessarily. We talked about them leading up to the season. They're very talented, and I think that they would have been players in this division had they had some stability and consistency at quarterback. But I don't know. It just seems like this is an opportunity where it doesn't really matter what the Saints are going to do. I think the Bengals are going to be really focused in this one.
I think you're right, and I think you're starting to see a little bit of the baby steps or building blocks or whatever you want to call it in terms of what they did with the run game last week, and maybe altering the game plans here. So we'll see what happens there. What's the matchup you're most? I've got two questions for you. What's the personnel matchup you're looking to the most, and do you think a bigger key for the Bengals to win this one is more continued solid defense and doing kind of what they've done over the course of the first 5 games, or is it going to take, if it's one or the other, right? If it's solid defense and continued blah from the offense, or is it going to take that offensive explosion and maybe giving up more points than from the defense to get this one?
I think the offense has to find ways to create explosive plays, and I think that's ultimately what we're going to see for the first time this week. I think the Saints have a secondary filled with guys that like to take chances. I think Marshawn Lattimore has not played particularly well in these past couple of weeks. He didn't really play well against the Vikings and Justin Jefferson. He wasn't really targeted that much against the Seahawks, but he should see a lot of Jamar Chase, who is also coming back to Louisiana for the first time in his career. Tyrann Mathieu is also a safety back there, and he's played well, but he also has been known to take chances and kind of overrun. Their other cornerback, Paulson Adebo, is one of the worst cornerbacks in the NFL right now. If T. Higgins comes back, like that's a complete mismatch for them. I see opportunities for the Bengals to, at this point, like not necessarily force it, but I think there's going to be some sense of like, hey, you know what? If we see the slightest chance of taking the top off the Saints defense, who I do believe will institute a lot of quarters coverage and cover 2 and whatnot. They'll keep their safeties back. I think that's what they like to do on defense. I think the Bengals would be more inclined to take shots at the very slight chance that they see it and not necessarily just go down to Mixon or Hurst or P. Ryan in the check down. I think you'll see a little bit more aggression. I think there'll be some type of an emphasis between Burrow and Chase to try to get this thing right. And I think the Saints are inclined to make 1 or 2 more mistakes than they're allowed to do so in this game.
I will be interested in seeing what happens a bit in the trenches. Last week I said it was kind of Josh Tupou was a guy that I would be keeping an eye on. Alex Kappa has a 64 PFF score on. When I looked at Karras and Kappa, I kind of just assumed Karras maybe had a slightly higher score than overall score than Kappa does, but it's actually the opposite. Karras is at 60, Kappa's at 64. So I'm interested to kind of see, especially now, if we're going to see more inside runs, like you said, the gap scheme as opposed to the wide zone scheme. If they are going to start trending that way, I'm interested to see how the interior of the offensive line holds up, and if last week was just kind of an outlier, or if this is going to be a trend that they are going to be able to continue. And then, like you said, pop those explosive plays potentially there. And then, of course, if Higgins doesn't go, you got to look at, is Mike Thomas going to be the guy that is going to be able to give you some plays here and there? Are you going to mix in more Stanley Morgan on offense at times? Is that going to be a by committee type of thing? I don't know. So those are some of the elements there. I do think, obviously, Higgins, if he does not play because he did not practice on Wednesday, that is not going to be good for the Bengals there. But all in all, one being all of the injuries to the Saints there. I mean, I'm sure a lot of those guys will play, but I mean, there is a lot of names on that injury report. And so between I think some urgency with the Bengals and some of the foundation set last week with the run game and even in the weeks prior against the Dolphins and the Jets, I think maybe they're going to start building some things, and then you've got a stretch of potentially winnable games here, and I think they know that they need to seize that. So I think riding the ship starts this week, and I do think the Bengals win probably by 9 points, something to that effect. I'll say 28-20, something like that.
Okay, that was pretty close to where I was going with it. It does seem like, well, it doesn't seem like it is true. Like when they win, like it's not convincing, but it doesn't come down to the wire like when they lose, right? So I agree with a lot of what you said. I think they build off the run game, the progress that they made there. Again, I want to give the Saints a lot of credit for their defensive talent. I just think there's going to be something that kind of pushes them to go forward here. I think being back in the Superdome, Burrow kind of played it off as like no big deal, and I believe it for the most part, but I don't know. I'm going with the vibes here. I'm going with the vibes of him and Chase coming back here. I'm going with the vibes of Hendrickson and Apple. Albeit one guy is hated by the fan base, the other guy is not, but he wasn't offered or a competitive offer to come back, and I think there's a chip on his shoulder as well. I'm going with the vibes here. I'm going 28-17 win.
Okay, I like it. All right, well, we're going to start closing up here. Before we're going to introduce something a little new. We're going to do a little trivia because my birthday a few weeks ago, my wife found this trivia book, Cincinnati Bengals trivia book. It is by Ray Walker. And I'm going to leave you, first of all, what's really cool, if you go to raywalkermedia.com, you can download for free a Crazy Sports Stories book that he has written as well. So free little fun read for that. I have not read that one, and I have not read this, John, but what I'm going to do, we're going to do two things, and we're going to let the live listeners cue in here. First of all, I'm going to ask you a question from here. I'm going to let you pick a topic from like 12 chapters, and then you can pick, and then I'll try and pick one out of the blue there. We have not prepped this. John doesn't know anything about this. I've barely cracked open this book, so I don't really know the answers to them yet without potentially just knowing it off the top of my head. But for the live listeners, if you will ask one out there to you, first person who answers correctly, we've got nothing big, but a little prize package, some Bengals swag for you that we can send out to you. We just need your address. If you are the first person to answer it correctly, we'll do that. But we're going to let John go first here before we give it to the live listeners. And then, of course, we'll drop the mic and get out of here. Chap. So you got
if I answer correctly, that is my mic drop, by the way.
Okay. All right. Yeah. Origins and history, numbers game, calling the signals, between the tackles, catching the ball, trench warfare, no air zone, Super Bowl shuffle, shining the busts, draft day, let's make a deal, writing the book.
Oh my God. No air zone, I think was the thing. I'll go with that.
No air zone. That was chapter 7. So let's go to chapter 7. Give me a sec here. Nothing like dead air looking for quizzes here.
Oh, dead air zone.
Yeah, here we go. Dead air zone. There you go. Okay. Who is the last player to tie the Bengals record with 3 interceptions in a game? And it is multiple choice.
Okay.
A, Torrey James, B, Deltha O'Neal, C, Jonathan Joseph, or D, Leon Hall? Again, who was the last player to tie the Bengals record with 3 interceptions in a game?
So obviously Joseph and Hall played after O'Neal and Torrey. I don't believe Leon Hall ever had 3 interceptions in a game. I can be convinced that Joseph did it. I know for a fact that one of James or O'Neal did it. It might have been both, to be honest with you. So I'm going to go with Torrey James.
You know, that is a good guess.
But it's not the right one.
But it's not the right one. And you know what? The one that you were so certain.
Are you serious?
Yeah, Leon Hall is what it says here. Yeah, we'll have to consult this. We may have to look up. Yeah, we had Robert Hall say Leon Hall there. That was good. So yeah, it was Leon Hall to answer that one. Okay, so one more quiz, and we've got some fun stuff for a listener. One more quiz question. Whoever answers it right, we'll get you. We'll get you some fun stuff. You got to give us your address. Though you got to either DM us or hit us up on Twitter or something like that, and we'll do this. Let's see. Do we want to? You can pick though, John. Do you want a true false, or do you want a multiple choice for the listeners here?
Give them a true false. Give them a true false.
True false. Okay. This one might be kind of easy. All right.
Wow. Yeah.
Let's do this. Let's do this one. Rudy Johnson never had a 200-yard rushing game for the Bengals. Listeners out there, true or false?
Do. I just looked this up. December 21st, 2008, the Browns lost to the Bengals 14-0. Leon Hall, 3 interceptions for 87 return yards and a touchdown. I don't remember that game.
I don't remember that one either. Yeah, it happened. There you go. All right. It looks like, let's see, the answer, Rudy Johnson never had a 200-yard rushing game for the Bengals. It looks like Michaela is the first one I am seeing here on our timeline with the right answer, false. And that is correct. False. That he never had a 200-yard rushing game for the Bengals.
Was it Danny did it? Yeah, at 9:34 Eastern? A little bit up?
Well, I think false was to the other question there, because I hadn't asked at that point. I had already seen that false answer before I had asked the question there. So, Dan, we love you, but I think Michaela had it first. Yeah, there you go. See, look at this. We love the honest guy, Dan the man. Thank you.
You didn't know the question. He answered it. Man.
I know. So, Michaela, hit us up either via YouTube or something like that. We'll get you a little something, send you out a little something fun for doing this. And, hey, we'll make this a little staple either on this show and or Listener Questions Live if you guys like it. We'll send you out something fun there. And, yeah, man, I would have got that question that I gave you wrong as well, John. I tried to have a poker face when I read the answer, and I was like, man, that was Leon Hall? I didn't think so.
Shame on me, man. Leon Hall is an amazing dude. I'm sorry for doubting you. And guys, do not put your addresses on the internet, man. This is Facebook. Who knows who can see this?
Yeah, should we delete that one? I'll delete that.
DM either me or Anthony your address, Michaela. We'll send you the prize pack.
Yeah, please do. All right, let's drop the mic and get out of here. I can't let you drop the mic on a wrong answer there, John. That's so what do you got for us?
You know what? I'll just make it a tribute to Leon Hall. He was a member at Kenwood Country Club, and my cousin Jack, shout out Jack, was a caddy there, and he said like he was by far like the best and most enjoyable former or current athlete to caddy for. Like, he was just a really chill dude. He was an okay golfer, but I think that corroborates with a lot of what people say about Leon Hall, the person. Like, just one of my favorite all-time Bengals to have watched with my own eyes. Just an amazing football player. Continues to be underrated to this day. But, a little anecdote about, personal thing. Like, Kenwood is not an easy course to play, but I think he did all right. And that's just like after, I think it was first Achilles injury. He was playing golf. So really cool dude.
He's known, he was one of those highly productive guys and high character guys also. And, John, I always thought it was very, very cool at the end of his career how he transitioned from a boundary corner to an effective slot corner. He ended up being a really effective player there. Some people thought maybe he would even go one step further even later in his career and be a safety or something like that. I think towards the end of his career, he had an Achilles injury or something to that effect and still came back and was an effective player for the team. So good warrior there. And I'm going to give a weird shout out to Rudy Johnson. Rudy Johnson was, since he was the other question there, he was a guy that I just, that he was one of those guys. I know Chad, who we love, was one of the guys that was really, really responsible for the Bengals turnaround. And yes, Carson Palmer. Yes, John Kitna was as well, and many others, Marvin Lewis, of course. But Rudy Johnson quietly came in here and ended up being a really effective player. Wasn't fast by any means. He was powerful. He did definitely excel at breaking tackles, but he made the right reads behind that awesome offensive line that the Bengals had. I had a pup that I unfortunately do not have anymore that I named Rudy with the I. And after Rudy Johnson, because I had a soft spot for that running back there. So Rudy, and of course the chants of Rudy, we all love those, and back in the day too. Weird thing, do you remember how he kind of got into the lineup and really started to assert himself in 2003? Do you remember that story, John?
Why don't you rehash it to me?
I think the story, if I remember, since we're on this trivia deal, I think the story was Corey Dillon got in a car accident on the way to the stadium. It was against the Seattle Seahawks in 2003. And so he was like delayed or didn't, ended up being inactive in the game or something. And then, of course, Johnson comes in and starts making plays. And I think some of the fans started to, sense a little disgruntled nature from Dillon from years past, and also maybe splitting a little more carries than he would have liked with Johnson at that point. And Johnson just kind of took the opportunity and literally ran with it. So if I remember correctly, it was like a weird car accident before the game or on the way to the stadium by Corey Dillon that started the Rudy Johnson train rolling.
Man, I never had a dog growing up. The only dog that I had that I considered my own was my family friend's dog, and they got him in 2006, and they named him Rudy. Because
really,
yeah,
I think you've told me that before.
Yeah,
you've told me that before. Yeah.
So like the dog, there was another dog in the house. His name was Boomer for obvious reasons,
yeah.
And they named the little pup Rudy. He lived for 16 years, or 15 years. He was an old dog at the end of his life, but he was named after Rudy Johnson. Who, again, like I can't tell you athletically where Rudy Johnson was gifted, but he consistently ran for like 1,400 yards for like 3 seasons behind that great offensive line.
Yeah, there was this move he would do, man. It was the slowest spin move I had ever seen in my entire life. But for some reason, that slow ass spin move that he did always just like broke out of a tackle, and it was like an effective little move. He was just a thick guy, and he held on to the ball, and I don't know, it's just constantly positive yardage. So fun little part of Bengals history there as well. And if only Rudy Johnson knew hey, we got a membership there. Michaela joining the membership. We've added memberships, by the way, on our YouTube channel, so take advantage of that. Thank you, Michaela. Appreciate that, and we'll get you some fun exclusive material there being a member. So let us know though, Michaela, as well, how to get some stuff to you. That's going to do it for us. Fun trivia stuff at the end there. John, have a good rest of your week. We're trying to work out an interview with former Saints wide receiver Terrence Copper, who is now part of the Believe Podcast Network. Looking like that's either going to be either Thursday or Friday, potentially, for him, working on finalizing that. Hopefully we can get that to you this week. Should be a fun peek over the fence there. Believe is always so kind to us with all their guests and whatnot. So we appreciate that. Thanks once again to Justin from Engraven Vids last week joining us. Go check out his channel. Anything else before we bounce on out of here, John?
Who day over who dad, I guess. Let's do it. Let's go.
I can't top that one. That's a good one. Take care, everybody. We will talk to you soon.